Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. The Man in the Lake. Since I was a child, I've feared him deeply, though I've never laid eyes upon his elusive person. I can remember vividly walking along the narrow trail that surrounded Lake Victory during the Ides of October. The water, dormant and as reflective as glass, was enraged by the fiery reds of the perishing leaves that clung desperately to the maples surrounding it. If you glanced from a distance, you'd think it was a pit of lava, scorching through the center of the earth from the leaves that already pirouetted to the ground. A magnificent blanket of gold and orange stretched invitingly along at your feet. Consequently, as the trees became more barren, the seasonal breeze squeezed between the branches, knocking together their nimble limbs. With its powerful grasp, the whooshing breath of Mother Nature would envelop all sounds within an ear's distance of man. This type of silence was cathartic. If you closed your eyes, you could become coalesced with its gentle movement, as a spider web would become accessorized against the unbeknownst skin. The random assortment of sounds stemming from birds, the splashing of fish, an acorn falling from the tree, the ominous sounds of swaying, narrow trees like a rusted seesaw, or the mercurial patter of rain echoing against the wilted leaves, producing a light bass that was rhythmically harmonious to the ear. My grandfather always mentioned this man was always present, but you had to search persistently without fear or a cluttered mind. There was always talk of a dock, though the far side of the lake was unrecognizable from the conception, with its bends and curves to and from sight. He always said, not many find this man in Lake Victory, that it takes a special kind of person to gain his trust. The man was full of wisdom, distinguished, and had the ultimate answer to life's enigmas, he claimed. That he had experienced the greatest challenges man can face. I used to circle this lake frequently as a child, climbing trees for a better view, skipping rocks to alert him of my presence, and whatever other racket I could concoct to make myself evident as far as I could muster the courage to. Of course, this came to no avail. In my mind, the imagery of this man had always changed. Some days, he would be terrifyingly tall, his limbs slender, and his eyes were always hidden underneath a low-positioned straw hat. Other days, he would have a becoming face, accentuated by a tinge of red from physical exertion. I pictured him growing corn in small patches, picking berries from wild bushes, and fishing regularly from his forsaken dock. A fire would be ablaze during his nights, where he would sit complacently, listening to the crickets and the sounds of night. As I went through high school and college, the distraction and monotony of life had guided me far away from Lake Victory, in search of material things, to chase a dream enriched by hollow rapacity. My family's vacation home had become a distant memory. I no longer needed to acquaint this man during the fall, because he no longer could fill the void inside of my heart as he would in my youth. Or so I thought. I figured that new quest, with all the goals I had set for myself to accomplish, would provide far more solace than the man in the lake. I riddled myself with distraction, so much so I was afraid to be alone with my own thoughts, praying my responsibilities and egocentric monsters that loomed behind would never catch up to my incessant steps and thoughts. However, when things that provide no internal peace reach an expulsion point, there comes the burnout. It wasn't until I was 37 that for the first time in my life, I began to feel the weight of time bearing down upon my slouched and exhausted shoulders. It was quite amazing when I returned, how the lake had never lost its luster. However, it is also true that not many know of this lake's whereabouts. Furthermore, it would be bizarre to even encounter another bystander in your journeys around its trail. It wasn't long before I started to realize that the wonderful colors that encapsulate nature never truly lose its vigor. Only the man-made things in life itself begin to fade as your optimism and naivety of being young dissipates as you embrace the harsh realities of existence. The future remembers history in black and white, though those who lived it always can revisit the palette that painted their peaks, whether the ravishing color of their wives' eyes when they first met, the color of their first vehicle sitting, sparkling in the driveway, or his father's blue flannel shirt, always rolled up to the elbow as he returned home from work. I remember spotting the rays of the sun streaming through the naked branches, placing my hand within its warm consultation like I did as a child. My pallid flesh began to glow as an orb would, the light bending around and through my stretched fingers as I tried to ball it up and capture it within my selfish fist. The trees, though still gallant and strong, were showing signs of age then. Their bark had become brittle and fissured. The base of some of these trees had become cavernous, offering safe haven for the smaller critters. I reflected on my own appearance, with the subtle lines beginning to formulate below and beside the eyes, the random sprouts of gray hair poking through my sideburns, and the pouch of flesh that had grown dormant around my waist. I, too, was succumbing to life's greatest guarantee, and I reflected upon my mortality as I rested my hand against the withering bark in passing. The man in the lake must be growing old. It was then that again I was enlivened by the man himself as I began to intake the fresh air. Surely in my adulthood I could find this man, who must be very old himself, and not as evasive as he was many, many years before. Those creaks and snapping of branches under the light prancing of the deer would set my heart ablaze, gawking maniacally and frozen still, hoping to finally catch a glimpse of this folklore. The ground was still forgiving to my steps, still fecund from the week's rain, and my soles glided effortlessly across the discarded tapestry of leaves as they did when I was young. And through certain partitions between the blinding trees, you could catch a swooping heron, the elongated neck, saintly patience, and aloof demeanor, awaiting the perfect moment to spear its beak into unsuspecting prey, just as they had in early summers. I remember the trail was as underutilized as ever at 37, stumbling atop exposed roots and stubbing my toe against jagged rock. I had been swimming through the thickets, gently whipped by the returning force, though I continued to push further than I'd ever had as a child. It wasn't long then before that allure and optimism that guided my clairvoyance towards the man in the lake previously was becoming shrouded by the enclosing nature surrounding my steps. Briefly, I remembered pausing within a small pocket of land, like an atrium within the center of the forest, and weighed my options going forward. I concluded that maybe my grandfather made up this man in the lake, that maybe I knew this all along and held on to this anecdote, like one holds on to an old shirt from his past, attached to the memories it harnessed. It was then I turned towards the trail where I had come from. Then I craned my neck towards the hazardous continuance just ahead. Something within was battling, opposing forces destined for different destinies, though I allowed my city-wrought mind to win the battle once again. I turned back towards my vehicle, leaving the man behind once again. Now, I am 79. I've raised children, paid off my mortgage, made all the money one can make to live a satisfied life. However, something was gnawing in the confines of my mind. The man in the lake. Here I was again. The trail was non-existent now, but I allowed what was left of my memory to guide me towards my former footsteps upon weakened limbs. Some of the trees now had fallen, and Lake Victory was as exposed as it ever had been, as I gingerly stepped around the detriments of my journey. In brief increments, the past would flash before my eyes, and through my childhood eyes, I was allotted the opportunity to see Lake Victory in all of its former glory. My breathing was heavy, my hands calloused as I tightly grasped my walking stick. My calves were aching tremendously, though my heart thumped with the excitement and fervency of a teen. I knew this was my last opportunity. The fall always seemed to leave me speechless. How could it be? Something that I've witnessed dozens of times still enraged my love for this very earth, just as it had the first time. It was the essence of beauty, natural, pure in all of its forms, and I was appreciative that it only climaxed for a few weeks. Things of such enchantment are usually ephemeral, undeserving of the burden of obsolescence. The woman you meet in a foreign land, gone before you awake in the morning. The feeling on a motorcycle, with your hair in the wind, barely avoiding death, and the war cry that follows, with your heart nearly shattering your rib cage. It was superior to all because it was effortless. It was the cycle of life itself. The atrium was still present, though it had shrunken to barely enough room for an elderly man such as myself. This time, I trudged through the webbing of branches and shrubbery, my face becoming sliced, and my hands bloodied by their sharp teeth. I could see the sun breaking through, about 20 feet ahead. This must have been where the man lived. I broke through the remaining brush, out into an open field. The purple and yellow flowers arched from their nesting spots, swallowed by the remaining green of October that survived by a water source. I looked upwards, glad to see the sun, receptive to its blanketing of my worn flesh. Then I looked towards the water once again, and there it was, the aforementioned dock. However, I was now forlorn, spotting no cabin in the woods, nor anywhere that a man could survive in such circumstances. I did not see his corn, nor his burn pit, where he spent his nights. I've spent my whole life, in retrospect, always comparing myself to the man in the lake, his humble attitude, his love for nature, his ability to acquire happiness without material things. His lore kept me grounded to reality. And now I was faced with the harsh truth that his existence was never crafted by veracity. Nor was this apotheosis one in which I dreamed many times before. I harped upon why my grandfather would speak so greatly of him, as if a friend. Why allow me to go on these wild goose chases, hoping to encounter some begrimed being, steeped in desolation? I approached the dock apprehensively, acknowledging its worn and derelict bones, the way it slouched towards the right side, and how the algae grew rampantly across its damp surface. I took a careful step and stopped, now hearing the lapping water gently clapping against the embankment, taking along with it the atrophied leaves, as a Viking would be sent off during his death. I took another step, stopping once again, surprised by the stability with a poke of my stick, and then decided upon shuffling towards the very edge. Here I stood, looking out over the lake that had held such a prized position within my heart. I looked down towards the surface of my hands, with all of the wrinkles and liver spots that come regretfully with age. Then I looked around the lake, witnessing its vitality once again. I understood that though some of the trees would tumble, that this very dock itself will eventually surrender to entropy, that the man in the lake may have been a farce, that ultimately I was eternally grateful for everything it had provided me in my life. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, feeling the brisk air searching through my lungs. As I exhaled greatly, there was a surge of enlightenment that had imbued a deep revelation just as I had opened my eyes. And it was at this moment I knew I had found the man in the lake. As I looked down, just ahead of the last portion of the dock, I saw my reflection within the still water. The white hair that whisked away with the gentlest of breezes. The thick, clouded glasses that stretched across my eyes. My hunched disposition, barely holding up underneath my trembling legs. This fascinating search for a character that had lived deep within all of our souls. One stripped bare of the repressed angst and uncertainty that haunted us all outside of this mystical place. With all of its simplicity and understanding of life that one tends to convolute upon their odyssey towards enlightenment. This was the ultimate lesson, and it took a lifetime to understand. I was the man in the lake, just as my grandpa had once been, and maybe one day you will be too. The quiet before. I bent low over the painting, the tip of my brush dotting at the corner of the landscape. It was just a tree, after all, but the spot of varnish that had welled up and discolored over the years needed to be removed. When the acetone leached into the surface, it peeled back, and my heart clenched. As the varnish removed a layer of paint, it revealed a subtle, dark patch of pigment beneath its surface. I sat back, a chill running through me. Underpainting. Maybe a hidden painting? I held my breath and stripped off my rubber gloves as I leaned back from the canvas. The visible image was a simple landscape, rolling hills and a few meandering roads, the colors muted by age and dust. The sky was a washed-out blue, and the trees on the horizon seemed too far off to be of much importance. It was nothing special, but that was never the point. What mattered now was finding out what lay beneath. I put on fresh gloves and lifted the painting with care. The canvas felt heavier than it should have, and I walked slowly over to the imaging lab. I positioned it carefully on the table, making sure that it was level, before placing the X-ray scanner above the canvas. The machine hummed to life, and I stepped back to the desk as the images slowly appeared on the screen. Beneath the visible landscape, buried under layers of thick, muddled paint, was a face. It was likely a woman, as I could see brush strokes of long hair curling around her face beneath the layers. The image was ghostly, faint, and slightly blurred, but unmistakable. A portrait. The faint outline of her features, her eyes staring somewhere just beyond the frame, sent a shiver through me. She was there, just beneath the surface. I didn't need to look at the X-ray again. I'd seen enough. I grabbed my phone and quickly searched for the artist's name. It was barely anything, just some obscure mentions in art journals, but something about it felt wrong. There had to be more. I spent the next few days buried in the archives. The museum had extensive access to resources on all sorts of artists, but the painting's creator remained elusive. There was nothing concrete about him, just scraps of details on a man who seemed as obscure in life as he was in death. The painting, this painting, felt like a living thing, pulling me deeper into its mystery, one layer at a time. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how much there was to discover. As I attempted to track down her creator, I peeled back the landscape layer by layer, revealing the portrait of a strange, haunting woman. Her pale face was framed by dark, flowing hair that reached her shoulders. Her gaze was distinct, distant, yet her features soft, as though she's looking at something or someone beyond my reach. There was a haunting grace, a quiet calm to her, but an unsettling depth in her eyes. The light in the portrait was soft and diffused, casting a faint glow on her skin and creating gentle shadows under her cheekbones, giving her face an almost ethereal quality. She sat as though she is regal, with a slender curve to her neck, though her pose was rigid and upright. Her gown looked heavy and richly textured, and almost blurred into the darker background. I found myself losing time, focus, and all sense of responsibility to this woman. Time had started to slip away in ways I couldn't explain. Days melted into one another, the world around me a blur as I spent more time with her. But no matter how much I uncovered, there was always a feeling that I was just scratching the surface. I pulled the stack of archived files towards me and sighed, taking another sip of the peach energy drink I'd come to rely on during these long stints of hunting down the elusive painter of the hidden woman. I'd discovered his name was Luigi Diovina. But beyond that, there were mere snippets of his life. An article about his madness toward the end of his life, and a lost last painting commissioned for a baroness. That article had sent a shiver up my spine. Could this be that painting? If so, I'd found a hidden treasure, but the baroness remained unnamed, leaving me with no way to verify who she was. I leaned back in the chair, my eyes falling once more on the image of the woman. I hadn't been able to stop thinking about her. I wasn't the only one noticing the strain. Clara, Jenna, a senior restorer, pulled me aside. You've got to get back to the other works. The other paintings are falling behind. Victor has been asking about the St. Catherine piece. The museum's losing patience. I nodded, though I couldn't shake my growing unease. I'll catch up, I murmured, but even I didn't believe it. I couldn't focus on anything else. The painting, the Baroness had started to call her, had started to become the only thing I could focus on. Even when I tried, I found myself returning to the painting, as if it were calling to me. The woman's eyes seemed to follow me wherever I went. The deeper I investigated her, the more she began to consume my thoughts, my every waking moment. The article had come from a dusty file in the back of the local library, one that had been buried on microfiche and stuffed away in a back room somewhere. I'd had to bribe the front desk worker with a box of donuts and a large coffee, so she'd dig it out for me. But once I'd scrolled through 3 years' worth of articles on local auctions, I finally struck pay dirt. Haunted painting sells at auction. Deadly Baroness's portrait said to haunt Diavina's last known work, the headline read, giving much more detail than any other piece ever had. Though the Baroness was still unnamed, the full article mentioned the painter's dying days. Diavina's obsession with his final portrait left him a shadow of the man he once was. Those who knew him said he would often stand in front of the canvas, seemingly lost to time, as though the woman's eyes spoke to him. In his last weeks, it was rumored he painted over the face of the woman. This had to be the painting, but how had it ended up in our archives? Why had he painted over her face? The deeper I uncovered the painting, the more I believed that the woman, her secrets, were pulling me into a vortex of obsession, just as they had Diavina. Clara. My head jerked up, the soft brush in my hand. The Baroness's eyes were inches from mine, her creamy skin slowly being cleaned at my skillful hands. I blinked and sat back, gazing around the room for the source of my name. But no one was around. The office was strangely empty. I stretched my back, leaning slightly over the chair, and stood up to walk down the hall. Empty. And it was dark. Curious, I walked a few steps towards the archives room. Clara! I whipped around. No one was there, but the voice had come from my office. I rushed back in, but found only the Baroness staring at me. Why were her eyes fixed on me? Her gaze had moved. Her eyes seemed to be fixed on me, just as obsessed with me as I was with her. As I stepped around the stacks of files, my tools, and other paintings I'd neglected in favor of the Baroness, her eyes followed me around the room. I slowly sat down on the stool I'd left in front of her, sitting eye to eye with her. It was only us in the room, no one else. The next day, I gazed around Vincent's office as he sat in front of me. His arms were crossed over his chest, and the furrow in his brow only deepened as he watched me fidgeting. "Clara," he said, catching my attention. I glanced up quickly, my eyes locking on his face. "I understand that you're passionate about the restoration, but we're running a museum, not a one-woman project. You've been neglecting the other pieces for weeks now. You know how important the St. Catherine piece is. If it isn't ready by the next exhibition, I'll get to it," I said, cutting him off. I blinked rapidly. The St. Catherine piece was complex, but it was just a cleaning job, and since I didn't need to paint anything, I'd be able to finish it quickly. "Clara?" My eyes widened as the familiar, haunting voice called my name. "Do you realize how much time you've spent on this?" Vincent paused, his eyes narrowing as he searched for the right words. "This obsession? Don't ignore me." I closed my eyes and pressed my fingers to my forehead. I forced myself to meet his gaze. "I'll get it done. I just need a little more time." Vincent let out a frustrated sigh, his hands running through his hair. "I need you to refocus. We can't afford this. Not with the exhibit coming up." "Clara!" My head snapped up, but it was just me and Vincent in the room. I glanced down, my heart pounding. His hands were strained, the same rusty red as the Baroness's dress, the splotches covering his fingers and seeping into his nail beds. "Clara," Vincent said sternly, though his voice was also tinged with worry. "You're letting everything else slip." He flicked through his computer and turned it to me, his stained fingers showing CCTV footage of the archives. And, "Is that me?" I asked, gazing at the screen. "Yes. You stood there for an hour like that, Clara. And this is at..." His voice trailed off as he checked the timestamp. His face grew increasingly lined with worry. "The point is, you haven't been yourself. You look like you haven't slept in days, Clara. This isn't you. Go home. Get some rest," he said, sighing as he adjusted the screen back to normal. I stood, and without hesitating, I left his office. "And don't do anything with that painting," he called as I stalked out. But it was calling me. She was calling me. I glanced into the studio from the sliver of a window in the door. Through the frosted glass, I could see a distorted view of the painting sitting on an easel at my workstation. I could see her outline, the delicate slope of her neck, and the blood red of her robes. Suddenly, a shadowy figure moved across the threshold of my door, and I jumped back, startled. I hesitated, struck by fear. Not that someone had broken into my office, but that someone was going to take the Baroness from me. I turned the doorknob, but of course, I'd locked it, and I could see her right there. She was right there. A chill swept through me, and I shivered, closing my eyes as I dropped my hand from the door. When I got home, I was a little shocked to see Ethan on the couch, anxiously texting people. "You're home?" I said, dropping my keys and messenger bag by the door and taking off my coat. He gazed up at me and tilted his head. "You're home," he said worriedly. There was no warmth to his voice, as if he was put out with me. I furrowed my brow. "Yeah, Vincent sent me home early, said I looked tired." "What? Early?" "It's 9 p.m., Clara," Ethan said, putting his phone down. I blinked and looked out the window, my stomach clenching. He stood up, moving over to me as he noted the look of confusion on my face. "What's going on, Clara?" he asked quietly. He reached out to rest his hand on the small of my back, but I pulled away, a feeling of overwhelming anxiety rolling through me. "Nothing. I can't." I shook my head and then glanced up at him. "I can't remember what I did. Vincent sent me home at 11? I said, my stomach twisting again. I leaned into the kitchen counter, holding it tightly. Ethan looked shocked, his lips parting to calculate the math. "Okay, it's fine. We'll figure it out. You've just been stressed with the exhibition coming up, and all the work," he said, rubbing my back gently. I shook my head, reaching for my bag and rifling through it. My fingers crossed over something gold and metallic. I furrowed my brow and pulled out the ring of archive keys. It jingled in my hand, and I closed my eyes, shaking my head. "Why do you—" Ethan began, but I cut him off. "I must have just shoved them in my bag. It's fine," I said, taking a deep breath. I put the keys gently back into my bag and took out my phone again, checking the time. "It's late. I'm late. I came home late. I'm just tired," I said slowly, rationalizing things to myself. "Okay. Do you want to just call it a night? Get some rest? Maybe a shower?" Ethan asked. I saw his nose crinkle from the corner of my eye. Did I stink? My jaw twitched as I bit my cheek. "Yeah?" I nodded, but couldn't help the feeling that Diavina's Baroness had something to do with the loss of time. I closed my eyes and Ethan brushed my hair back from my face. "Okay," I said, pulling away from him. He looked sad, but didn't move towards me as I stalked off to our bedroom, my phone held loosely in my fist. I stepped into the hallway leading to our bedroom, the light from the kitchen spilling across the dark-toned wood behind me. As I stepped towards the darkened bedroom, I felt a drift, and my head felt heavy. I stopped at the doorway and lifted my head. My fingers paused on the light switch. The room glowed with the dull orange light from the street lamp that streamed through the curtains. It made for an eerie sort of atmosphere. But that's not why I paused. My eyes were locked on the full-length mirror across the room from me. Its glassy surface should reflect only the bed, maybe the edge of my body, not the full shadow that stood ominously facing me. I blinked, frozen in place as I stared at the shadow. It almost pulsated, its shoulders hunched. It wasn't exactly shapeless, but it didn't have any defining features. Still, it felt familiar in a way it shouldn't have been. My fingers twitched, brushing the edge of the light switch. I took a shaky breath. I flipped the switch, and the figure was gone as soon as light flooded the room. The mirror was empty. My chest clenched painfully, and I leaned against the door frame. Slowly, I flicked the light again. There she was, dominating the mirror, a black mass. But I knew her. I knew who she was. I flicked the light on again, and she was gone. But just as quickly, I flicked it off, and she was there. Panic rose like a bile in my throat. Distantly, as if underwater, I could hear Ethan calling to me, but his words were lost. Because the Baroness was calling me, her voice was rising in a screaming ring in my ears. I trembled with fear as I stepped towards the mirror, towards her. My mind fought my body as deep, panicky breaths burst from my chest. As I stepped up to the mirror, the shadow swelled and blossomed, the shrill screams rising to fever pitch in my ears. A hand wrapped around my shoulder just as the mirror shattered. It's with great pleasure that we present the final restored work of Luciano Diovina, the Baroness. Its beauty belies its tragic past, and we are proud to display it as a memorial to our departed co-worker. Vincent held the champagne glass aloft, then took a sip and stepped down from the podium. Beside him, the Baroness had been artfully restored, her colors vibrant, her skin creamy, her robes deep and gory slash of blood red. She looked almost youthful, brought back to life at Clara's skilled hands. It's a shame. An older woman stands next to a younger one, both eyeing the Baroness and the in memoriam plaque that had been hung next to her frame. The younger one nods, glancing nervously at the portrait. It's tragic. But did you hear about what happened with her boyfriend? I mean, the portrait, sure, it's gorgeous, but I heard it was bad. They glance at the painting. Like gruesome. Like she was obsessed? They cut off, clearly unsure how much to say. The older co-worker's voice drops even lower. Obsessed doesn't even cover it. But you didn't hear it from me. It's a horrible end, though. They each sip their champagne, the younger one shivering as if she said too much. The older glances down at her watch. Come on. The presentation. We're late. The night the engines died. The passengers of Flight 227 had just completed their meal. The cabin buzzed quietly with the clinking of silverware, an intermittent laugh, and the faint sound of rustling newspapers. Ordinary, routine sounds that masked behind the fragile facade of safety, the horror that loomed just beyond. A stewardess laughed at a joke told by a passenger. A man in first class swirled his wine, enjoying the final sip. Suddenly, the intercom crackled to life, its static sibilant as a snake wrapping its way around the unwitting passengers. Then the voice, calm, deliberate, but with an unnatural solemnity, as if the captain was reading his own obituary. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. A moment of silence, just enough time for apprehension to germinate. I need to inform you of an issue. The words hung in the air, like an executioner's blade, poised to drop. The atmosphere changed instantly, as though an unseen presence had blown a chilly breath over the cabin, permeating every crack and crevice, wrapping around each traveler like invisible fingers clenching into a fist. Talk stalled, laughter died, to be succeeded by tense silence, as though the whole aircraft had sucked in its communal breath. The pilot went on, his voice strained with shame, but shaking under the burden of the nightmare he had created. In my hurry to leave Charles de Gaulle Airport, I failed to adequately monitor our fuel levels. A long, ragged pause ripped through the intercom, as though he was fighting to get out the words. I am ashamed to say this. I know I have let you all down. A hollow, uncomfortable silence fell over the cabin, choking the air like an invisible hand squeezing against each chest. The pilot paused to catch his breath before continuing, his voice cracking under the strain. Since we have been flying for a long time, our destination could be beyond our reach, since we may lack sufficient fuel to get there. The finality of his confession hit the passengers like a physical blow, drawing the air out of the cabin as though the aircraft itself had inhaled a gasp of horror. Some cried out loud. Others were paralyzed, their hands clenching armrests so hard that their knuckles whitened, as though through sheer force of will they could halt the unstoppable. A man grasped at his chest, his breathing shallow and fast, the first spasms of fear gripping his heart. The aircraft, once a sanctuary of order and technology, was now a prison of uncertainty. A metal coffin cutting through the emptiness at 500 miles an hour. Every flashing light, every jolt of turbulence seemed to foretell disaster. The whispers of fear were growing louder, building into a jarring buzz of terror. There were no strangers then, just the doomed, held together by the unspoken grasp of fear as they spoored toward some unknown destiny. And then another violent and convulsive shudder that ripped through the aircraft as if it had been seized in a death grip by an invisible hand. One of the engines coughed, sputtered, and died. The whole plane shuddered as if it had been hit by an invisible blow. A jolting crash of bone that threw passengers from their seats and sent loose objects flying through the cabin. The sickening lurch sent drinks crashing, trays falling to the floor, and overhead lockers bursting open, their contents spilling into the aisle. Gasps turned to screams as the cabin tilted, the aircraft going into an unnatural descent. The aircraft had already started to descend to New York, but now it was plummeting, no longer descending in a controlled manner, but spiraling out of control. The cabin lights flickered madly, casting crazed shadows on faces paralyzed with terror. The aircraft lurched violently, its damaged fuselage objecting to the stress. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling like ghostly apparitions, dangling inertly amidst the chaos. The cabin erupted into pandemonium. Screams of abject terror, cries for assistance, the raspy howls of those who recognized the inevitable. The night sky outside, once an endless expanse of stars and silence, now pressed in like the walls of a closing tomb. The vastness had turned suffocating, a cosmic void ready to consume them. Below, the earth was no longer a distant haze, but a giant, looming thing, reaching out to snatch them with an appetite that threatened to consume them. City lights unfurled like streaks of flame, oblivious to the souls above, speeding towards their fate. The altimeter ticked down at a remorseless pace. The aircraft was still too far from New York City. Its decreasing altitude, a grim countdown, without reprieve. There were no longer any alternative airports, no deviations, just the relentless descent, and the understanding that hope was running through their fingers like sand in a gale. The cockpit was a maelstrom of confusion. Alarms screaming, warning lights flashing like a dying pulse. The aircraft strained against gravity, shuddering so violently the control panels creaked. The first officer's white-knuckled fists held tight to the yoke, his forehead beaded with sweat. His voice, strained and almost lost in the din of automated warnings, sliced through the chaos. The second engine coughed, sputtered, and with a final agonizing splutter, died in silence. A jolting stillness filled the cockpit, broken only by the otherworldly shriek of wind whistling past the fuselage. It was the kind of stillness that felt unnatural, deafening in its absence of power. A stillness that presaged catastrophe. The aircraft, a marvel of controlled engineering, was now reduced to a huge metal husk, a crippled glider flying through the darkness. The control panels blacked out, their frantic warnings muted, as if even the plane itself had given up. The first officer's breath caught, his fists still gripped on the dead yoke, as if sheer willpower could urge power back into the engines. His eyes bulged wide, darting to the altimeter, its numbers free-falling with heart-stopping speed. The first officer's knuckles turned white on the throttle. We're dead stick. No thrust. The captain's mind reeled. We can glide this in. His voice, which he tried to keep steady, trembled. He was not sure. It seemed to take forever for the Ram air turbine to deploy, its little turbine opening up into the howling wind like a desperate, last gasp prayer to the emptiness. Inside the cabin, the flight attendants strode down the aisles with stiff formality, their faces drawn but determined, their voices, strained as they were, carried the authority of rehearsed command. "Brace for impact, please," one of them screamed, her voice hardly cutting through the noise. A few passengers complied at once, throwing themselves forward, arms clasped around their heads. Others were paralyzed, their brains locked in denial, unable to comprehend the unimaginable. One man struggled with his seatbelt, shaking so hard he couldn't locate the buckle. A woman clutched the armrest so hard her fingernails cracked on the plastic. The emergency lights strobed feebly, casting eerie shadows that twitched on faces contorted in terror. People shrieked, a loud, grating cacophony of terror. Some embraced their loved ones. Others slapped hands over their faces, screams muffled by the deafening quiet of the plummeting plane. A flight attendant, holding onto the back of a seat for balance, mouthed frantic reassurances no one heard. The aircraft vibrated heavily, the fuselage complaining in protest to the strain of its powerless plummeting. Unsecured items flew around the cabin, bouncing off chairs and people. Each passing second seemed impossibly long, as if the fabric of time itself had rent asunder under the threat of disaster. The captain gritted his teeth, his hands trembling over the controls. The glide of the plane was erratic, its path a hardly controlled plunge into the emptiness. The cockpit echoed with alarms, relentless, screaming their warnings in a cruel mockery of hope. Smoke from the failing systems wreathed through the dim light, the acrid scent of burning circuits searing his lungs, and then, out of the spinning darkness, out of the turmoil, he saw it, a faint, glimmering glow in the distance, cutting through the blackness like a sliver of salvation. New York City, runway lights, a fragile lifeline quivering in the fog, teasingly distant. But could they reach it? Or was it an illusion, a mirage in the final few seconds before extinction? The first officer's breath caught, his heart racing in his throat, as his eyes locked onto the gleaming light ahead. We might make it, after all, he whispered, his voice trembling with a faint, desperate hope, as though saying the words aloud could make it so. But beneath his words was the unspoken fear, the knowledge that they were still at the mercy of gravity, the wind, and fate itself. But they hadn't reached there yet. The trees rose like shattered black shapes, their gnarled branches reaching out greedily toward the plane, as if to pull it down into nothingness. He had seconds. His grasp of the yoke was vice-like, his knuckles white under the faint glow of the flickering gauges. The plane bucked in an irregular motion that was wild, turbulence and gravity resisting every movement. His heart throbbed in his head, but his mind was fixed in steel-sharp concentration. The first officer took a deep breath. Hold it just a little longer. The branches on top of the trees were closing in. The runway lights continued to flicker ahead, teasingly near, yet impossibly distant. They were on the brink of salvation or doom. One last risk, one last wild maneuver. With a violent tug on the controls, he went for the gap. The tops of the trees scraped the underside of the plane, ripping at the undercarriage. The sound of metal on wood screamed through the cabin, and then a deafening, bone-crushing bang. A merciless cacophony of screaming metal and bursting steel, as if the heavens themselves had fallen. The force of impact vibrated through the fuselage, seats ripped from their mounts, bodies tossed around like dolls, flames licked along the broken edges of the aircraft, illuminating the darkness in an otherworldly, flickering glow. A choking cloud of smoke rolled through the wreckage, its acrid grip tightening around every strangling breath of air. The ground trembled with aftershocks, debris still creaking and groaning in the burning wreckage. Then, silence. A fragile, unnatural silence, shattered only by the crackles of fire and the rough, strained breathing of those who remained alive. There were cries from the rubble, some in the distance, some close, bare with pain and shock. The reek of smoldering petrol clung to the air, a bitter reminder of how close they had come to complete destruction. And when the smoke finally cleared, the twisted remains of the plane lay stretched out like a broken, tortured thing, its bare skeleton scarcely discernible as the great ship that it once was. And yet, despite all the odds, everyone was alive, poised between the salvation and oblivion, balanced on the brink of an impossible second chance. The captain, bruised and inexplicably alive, gasped as he released his harness, his sweat-soaked fingers shaking with aftershock. His ribs throbbed with searing pain, every breath a burning reminder of the savagery they'd just survived. He hauled himself up, vision fading, the metallic flavor of blood in his mouth. The debris lay before him like the scene of a nightmare. Flames licking across scorched metal. The bitter taste of fuel and smoke choking the air. Remote, tortured screams resounded in his mind, together with the ringing that had not stopped since impact. His head reeled, replaying every mistake, every warning he had ignored. The sign of his failure weighed upon him, more oppressive than the wreckage that enclosed him. He had made a mistake that should have killed everyone. High-speed train. Congressman David Chen found himself where he never guessed he'd be. The dining car on the express. A high-speed train humming through the Hungarian countryside. A patchwork of browns and gray dirty snow flashed by. Abandoned Soviet-era factories passed surreal in skeletal frames, riddled with broken windows and crumbling walls. David's head pounded. Nausea caused him to sweat. He hated trains, but loved his wife. And the Prague conference was over. Just one more meeting, and then he and his wife could take a river cruise out of Budapest. Studying the wine list across from David sat Marcus Blackwood. When the waiter came, he ordered a 2016 Tokaji. The waiter paused and bit his lower lip, avoiding Blackwood's eyes. "We only have a 2018. Your boss promised the 2016, Blackwood said, stroking his precisely trimmed stubble. "I suggest you find it, or else." David noted his old friend, the Blackwood he'd grown up with, the new director of Aid Alliance, had mastered making threats. "Trains have a finite quality," Blackwood mused as they waited for the wine. "Once you're on them, you can't get off." David sipped water from a crystal glass. "But you can change the destination. That depends on who's controlling the switches," Blackwood said. "By the way, how's your Sarah? She starts Columbia in the fall. Is that right? The tuition must be a killer." His stomach rolled over. How did Blackwood know about the Columbia acceptance letter? "She's fine. Elizabeth and I are quite proud of her. I saw you with Elizabeth at the Prague conference. Vacation? Yes. Doubling up the conference with time in Budapest." Blackwood winked. "And a write-off for the entire trip?" Blackwood tossed his right hand. "I was thinking about how we've known each other since the early days. Hell, I was at your wedding. We're warriors, you and I. Into the breach and all that. Well, this warrior is getting tired of the congressional grind. I'm thinking of not running next term. Call it quits. Blackwood laughed, his thick frame tight against his dress shirt. Say it ain't so. No, I would quit. But there's more I want to do. A few years, maybe. Then on to the speaker circuit. Or maybe a pack. The waiter returned with a 2016. We're in luck, Mr. Blackwood. He opened the wine, offered a taste, then served them both. He carefully placed the bottle on the immaculate white tablecloth. About your upcoming committee vote, Blackwood said. Aid distribution, of course, is of paramount importance. But with our audit showing only 30 cents on the dollar reaching recipients, there's some pushback we're fighting against. I've reviewed the proposal, David said. $8 billion might take some time to get through committee. Blackwood adjusted his broad shoulders and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We need to think about this from the 30,000-foot view, he said. After all, think of the optics. We're supporting democracy, fighting corruption, and aiding fledgling governments who need the world's help. The waiter refilled their wine glasses while the two men looked on. When he left, Blackwood gulped his wine, leaned into the table, and reached out to adjust David's tie. Our organization believes there's a benefit to a network of partners. We need expertise to walk us through a complex banking system, the regulatory environment. Would you consider getting involved? A non-profit, hip deep in money laundering, David thought. Excessive compensation, shell companies. A big plunge for a guy who doesn't fudge on taxes. Never has. Never will. I'm a congressman. I can't touch this. You know that, David said. No. Your role would be legitimate, I assure you, Blackwood said. That's what the advisory board is all about. Insurance for, he chuckled, derailments. We want you as a board member after your term ends. It's just, well, in the meantime, we'd like your advice. As a friend. The dulled rush of an opposing train sped by their window. Blackwood steepled his hands in front of him. How's Elizabeth's gallery, by the way? Her art might be worth more once she's passed. Of course, that could be decades away. We certainly don't want any harm to come to her, do we? Blackwood looked down and cut another piece of his steak. David's fork froze on the way to his mouth. He felt anger ripping his insides at the veiled threat against his wife. After slowly setting his fork down, he picked up his wine glass. His hand shook as he gripped the glass, but he gripped harder, and then harder still. The train entered a tunnel. David lost his concentration, diverted by the sudden brightness of the two men's reflection in the window. He stared at the image, but the man in the reflection who looked like him didn't stare back, but shattered the glass with his hand. David stared, transfixed. His reflection picked up a shard with his bleeding hand and wrapped the pointed glass with his cloth napkin. He then reached across the table and slashed Blackwood's throat. Blood splattered on the table as the reflection of Blackwood collapsed. The reflection blanked out as the train shot from the tunnel exit, the horn howling into the twilight. David stared at the wine glass in his hand. Blackwood was no longer across from him. David stumbled from the dining car. He lurched down the corridor to his sleeper cabin, fell into Elizabeth as she opened the door, reeled to the water closet, and retched in the toilet. "David, what happened?" Elizabeth called through the door. "My God!" The train approached the outskirts of the city. High rises ahead, pinned to the night sky, the lights in the windows staring down. Soon the train squealed into the station. Elizabeth gripped her husband's arm as they walked to the taxi stand, her eyes riveted on his face. "David? Darling? Are you okay? What happened?" "It's nothing," he said. She held him closer. "Are you feeling better? Talk to me. Did you forget anything?" David steadied himself against his wife. "No, I haven't left anything." As they walked to the taxi stand, he felt in his gut that Blackwood was gone. He realized he'd left him on the train. Some things you can never explain, he thought. But then he felt oddly privileged. He smiled, and even the grime of Budapest tasted a little cleaner. Fate, or science, or the devil himself had stepped in. But not God, he thought. No, this wasn't God. It was another presence, who didn't like the alliance, weighing the direction of his daughter's future, his wife's safety, or the price for his looking the other way. "Your hand's bleeding," Elizabeth said. "It looks like a piece of glass. The trip of a lifetime. The trees are so much bigger out here," I said, as I looked out the passenger side car window. We were driving from the airport in the cab we just got. The lady driving was rude. She barely even looked at us. But we're out of there, and officially on vacation. The flight was long. I tried to sleep, but the man next to me was a talker. "I'm too nice," my girlfriend says, "but that's what keeps the world a better place." Besides, the man kept buying me drinks, which is why I'm looking out the window. I might hurl, "And greener. This place is beautiful," says Kenny. We're finally in the Pacific Northwest. Our bags are packed, and we're headed to Mat Hood. We have a week out here, and 4 days spent in the mountains. Kenny has family out here, so we're staying with his aunt the first night, and then we're off to breathe that crisp forest air. We made it to his aunt's house. She was so warm and welcoming, I felt right at home. After a nice meal of homemade beef stew and a shower, I was ready for bed. I bid them good night, and off I went, fast asleep in no time. I woke up in a panic. The room unfamiliar. Where am I? I thought, as my senses start to adjust. There's a soft buzzing coming from the fluorescent lights above me. My arms and legs are secured to this hospital bed, it seems. But this doesn't feel like a hospital. It's too cold. I try to move my head, but that's secured too. Hello? I call, but no answer. Hello. Again silence. Suddenly a man is standing above me. He covers my mouth as I go to scream once more. Shut up! They'll know you're awake. And then they'll make you forget. You mustn't forget. It's not safe. Run! Something pokes me, and I'm out again. I awake in bed, extremely well rested. It's 6:00 a.m. What a crazy dream, I thought, as I smelt the coffee. I jump out of bed and run to the kitchen, where Kenny's Aunt Gloria is standing in her long silk lavender-colored nightgown and matching slippers. She seems so frail, yet strong and intimidating at the same time. A soft smile forms as she bids me good morning. Ken's not up yet, but you're more than welcome to join me for some bean water, she says with a chuckle. I follow her outside to the patio. The air is fresh and moist, the coffee warm and delicious. You can see the sun glisten off the morning dew as the birds sing their welcome to the day. It sure is nice of you to let us stay here, I say. Kenny and I have been planning this trip for a while now, and I'm so excited it's finally happening. You two boys, be careful out there. I hear stories all the time about hikers going missing in those woods. These aren't like the mountains you have on the East Coast. These are real mountains, inhabited by really big creatures. I'm sure you've heard of Bigfoot. She says. I chuckle. Ha, Bigfoot, please. He's just a myth. If Bigfoot is real, then I hope I see him. I'll take a photo and become rich. Gloria shook her head and looked deep into her coffee, almost as if she was trying to see the bottom of her cup through the black liquid it now held. Like I said, just be careful, please. It's now 10:00 a.m., and we are on our way to the mountain. Gloria let us use her car since she doesn't drive anymore. She's 75 now, and hasn't driven since she was 70, and got lost driving home. They found her a day later, parked in a parking area 15 miles from the house. We made it to the mountain after about 2 hours of driving, and we couldn't wait to get on the trail. As we loaded up our packs, Kenny and I discussed our route, where we would stop for water and lunch breaks, where we would camp, and which streams we will pass so we know where to collect water when we get low. All said and done, the trail up and down the mountain shouldn't take more than 3 days, but we're taking it slow since we haven't done a mountain of this caliber before, so we planned for 4 days. We're hiking Timberline Trail. It passes 3 major landmarks and has snow runoff year-round, so finding water shouldn't be a problem. In total, it's just over 41 miles. We're all loaded up and ready to start our hike when I realize I left my trekking poles at the airport. They must have fallen out of my pack. Just find a stick on the hike. It'll serve the same purpose, says Kenny. I mock him, but I know that's what will happen. Easy for you to say. You didn't forget anything, but he did. The compass. Well, how are we supposed to know where we're going now? I ask. We still have a map, and the trails are marked. It'll be fine, he says in a not-so-reassuring voice. We've been walking for hours, and I haven't seen a single soul. It's day 2 in the woods. The first day went by so fast, but now the excitement and newness has worn off. The woods are long and damp, flora as far as the eye can see. No roads, cars, people. Hey, are we on the right path? I ask. Yeah, we should be coming up on Cloud Cap in about 5 more miles. Ken responds. I don't believe him, though, and my body hurts. It must be from sleeping on the ground. And I kept having the dream about the guy telling me to run. Maybe that's just making me paranoid. There, see? I told you we're going the right way. That must be Cloud Cap Inn, exclaimed Ken. As I stumbled over the hill, I saw what appeared to me as an abandoned shack in the middle of the forest. I don't think that's it, I yell, but Ken was already sprinting towards the front door. I call first shower, he yells as he enters the doors. I approach the building cautiously, examining the weathered cedar shakes, the broken shutters hanging from the windows. How is this place still in business? I thought. I push open the heavy oak door, and inside the place looks immaculate. It's an open floor plan with 2 massive fireplaces at either side of the room. The carpet covers the hardwood floor, and drapes cover the windows. I look to the front desk. It's the man from my dream. I told you to run, he says as a loud bang comes from the room upstairs. Kenny screams, bang! Then silence. I run as fast as I can up the stairs, skipping 4 steps at a time. I take a left. The hallway goes on forever. Which room did it come from? Kenny! I yell as I'm racing down the hallway. I hear no response. Kenny! Again, nothing. I ran downstairs, and there's no one around. The doors are locked, and I can't get out. I try for a window, but they're boarded up from the inside. I ran back upstairs and tried those windows, but to no avail. I'm trapped. But how? Why? Just as I ask this, I hear a noise coming from the stairs. I turn around, and there I see it. Kenny's body, 2 gunshot wounds. It must feed, says a voice from the other end of the room. I turn to look. Gloria? Bang. My knee is on fire. I cry out in pain as the creature appears. I look into its bright yellow eyes, soulless and empty, its teeth big and sharp, lips stained with blood. Why Gloria? Because I love him, she says, as she points the gun straight at me, and he loves me. Bang! I fall to the ground. The world seems blurry. I see the smoke coming from the barrel of the Smith & Wesson. I see Kenny stand and take the gun from his aunt. Just as my eyes close for the final time, I should have ran. The end. I met death last night. Being alone in one of London's many streets, I was already cold. But his presence behind me was more than that. It was ice. Sharp, hard ice that seared through my flesh, traveled through my blood, urging goosebumps to shoot out of my skin. When I turned down the lonely alley, I regretted it instantly. It was said that he lingered in dark streets, waiting for a desperate soul to pass him by. But still, I had decided to keep going. Arriving in London on the night of my sister's birthday was already fine, but her party had begun at 8 p.m., and I didn't need to look at my watch to know that it was way past that already. She would kill me for being late. So late. But that wasn't the only reason I dared not turn back. It had been too long since I'd last walked these streets. Since I'd last felt the heavy air of London pressing down on me, clogging my lungs with soot and smoke. Life on the road had made me lighter, more restless. But coming back here was like stepping into a grave. The city had a way of sinking its teeth into you, of making you forget where you'd been and why you'd left. Fearing death was childish. My parents had told me as such when I refused to go on one of the rides at the festival extravaganza during our trip to America. But this was different. Like the images in my mind of falling from great heights and being trampled by horses had cleared, revealing something so impossible that it was the only thing my mind deemed plausible. He was behind me. I did not turn around. I did not blink. My eyes remained open, forgetting how dry they had become. I just stood there, an invisible force stopping my feet from taking off into a run, from sprinting around corners and through streets until he would inevitably catch me. I wondered what it would feel like. A sudden pain in my chest, a fog corrupting my mind. My vision slowly dimmed until I drifted off into a never-ending, dreamless sleep. Or maybe I would feel nothing. Maybe I would be awake 1 second, thinking of all the ways I was going to die, and the next I would be lying on the ground, waiting for someone to find me. Although by then, it would be too late. No one could ever be saved. The goosebumps grew larger as his presence sauntered towards me, like prey waiting for the predator. Knowing that it was neither fast enough nor strong enough to face it. I thought about all those moments I had let slip through my fingers, all those opportunities I had missed out on, all those potential friends, and more that I had hung back from, thinking that I wasn't worth their time. Now, I thought that I should have chosen who was worth my time, for it was going to be shorter than anyone would have expected. And who would have blamed them for thinking I had all the time in the world? I always thought, never did. Always calculated, never acted. Always worried about others, and never spared a thought for myself. Now, just like then, I waited. He was as silent as the night. The once cawing crows and hissing cats were already in mourning. He stood right behind me, dark as a shadow. His breath a gentle breeze against my neck. The single word spoken in a voice rich in charm, alluring me to turn around, to face the predator, but I did not turn around. Still, I did not blink. The feeling in my fingers came back, and I was met with the warmth of coming out of an ice bath into the blazing sun. My feet began to move, the invisible force gone like it was never there. And soon I was running through winding streets, trying to think of anything but what had just happened. I'm late, I thought. I'm so late. And my sister will be mad. I tried to convince myself that was why I was running. Nothing happened. I saw nothing. My breath tore through the night's air as my book struck the slick cobblestones. Gas lamps fought against the choking fog, blinding me. The stray hairs that I had forgotten to shave on my arms stood up as ice invaded my lungs once more. No, please no. I had heard people talk about terror whipping through them, causing them to panic and shake. But that was a lie. Terror didn't come all at once. It came in waves, each one bigger than the last, freezing my lungs and clenching my throat in a vice-like grip. Why did I think that I could outrun him? Why did I think I could outrun the inevitable? I looked down at my pale skirts, now splattered in mud, and refused to look up again. The shock of what I might see would kill me before he did. He made no sound as he approached for the second time. No footsteps, no shift of breath or fabric. Just the sudden, certain sense of him standing before me. Close, too close. My eyes stayed down. I could feel him watching me, the weight of his gaze pressing against my skin like the brush of fingertips. My breath hitched. My fingers curled into the folds of my dress. He said nothing. He did nothing. Just stood there, silent and motionless. The seconds stretched and broke. My pulse thudded in my throat like the fear in my stomach, mixing with something warmer. darker beneath my ribs. I imagined what his eyes must have been like. Dark, unblinking, tracing the line of my collarbone and the curve of my mouth. Then, just as quietly as he had come, he left for the second time in a single hour. Slowly, cautiously, I dared to lift my head. The street was empty again, mist curling through the dim light. I waited for what might have been seconds or minutes. I didn't know. But I managed to walk again. But I didn't run. I no longer cared that I was late. Finally, I reached it. A tall iron gate, its surface slick with rain that I hadn't realized was falling. A footman in a crisp coat stood at attention beneath a gaslight's feeble glow, his face blank under the brim of his hat. His eyes sharpened when he saw me. Without a word, he pushed the gate open, allowing me to slip through. The moment the gate clicked shut behind me, the street's grim chill seemed to dissolve. A long, white, gravel path wound through manicured gardens, lit by golden candles and strung by iron posts. Tall windows loomed over me as music floated through the air. As soon as I made it into the house, I passed the polished wood and gilded mirrors, up the stairs to the spare bedroom where I flopped onto the well-made bed, ignoring the state of my clothes. Did I feel bad for leaving my sister on her birthday? Of course, but I just couldn't cope. With anyone or anything. I didn't think I could even fall asleep, no matter how much my body craved it. I had spent so long moving from place to place, never staying long enough to leave a mark, never bothering to make ties. I told myself it was because I liked the freedom, the open road, the thrill of waking up in a new city with new faces. But the truth was simpler. It was easier not to care when you knew you wouldn't stay long enough to lose anything. I met death last night, and I lived. Angry Highway by Stephen Scott. Get the hell out of the way. Jerry made sure to honk twice at the fellow in the fast lane. The car moved over, slowly. He moved closer to the man's bumper and flashed his headlights. Come on, stupid jerk. David clutched his armrest, trying to hide his fright. Jerry, calm down. He sped past the car, glancing over at the elderly man. What? You sidin' with that idiot? He was blocking the passing lane. David, hoping to dodge the blunt words of Jerry, countered with a calm voice. Well, you're almost 15 over the limit. Jerry glared at David sternly. I'm the professional here. The trainee sighed, revealing his agitation. Do you want to ride with me or not? Not liking the hostile tone, David sighed. I just want to learn the procedures. Jerry set the steering wheel between his legs, reached inside the bag, and pulled out his hamburger. He ate it, then glanced at his newspaper. David somehow hid his panic, reached over, and took hold of the steering wheel. What the hell is wrong with you? Jerry asked through his bites. Just helping you out. I don't need your help. I do this all the time." David released his grip, fought his own irritation at Jerry's tone. David was the new guy and wanted a job, and certainly didn't want to piss off his trainer. He found a neutral subject. "So how long does the route take you?" "Some days it's longer," Jerry said between chews. "Some days I have to go to Weatherford or Mount Vernon. It depends on what the physicians in those towns need. It's pretty easy. I listen to the radio a lot, eat when I need to, take a dump when I need to. Seems like a lonely job." "It can be." He put down the food and paper and braked as he approached a slow truck. The highway reduced to 2 lanes, taking away a safe way pass. "Move it, jerk." It moved to the right slightly, but Jerry could not see around it. The truck slowed. "Move over, dipshit." Jerry pushed on the horn heavily. "I can't see." Although he saw a hill, he decided to go anyway. Pulling completely in the oncoming lane, he revved up the engine. A sports utility vehicle emerged in front of them. He sped up more, determined to get back over in front of the truck. The SUV slightly moved to the right while honking. Jerry accelerated his small pickup. "Shit," David whispered. He clutched the handle above his window as everything in his chest froze into a block of ice. Jerry zipped back to his lane with seconds to spare. Hearing both trucks honk at him, he stuck one hand out the window and extended his finger. "Jerks," he mumbled. David clutched his chest, breathing heavy. "Jerry, you may have been doing this a long time and used to pulling stunts like that. If you want to play with your life, that's fine. But you're also playing with mine." "What? It's their fault? The SUV or the truck should have pulled over or slowed down. There's no shoulder." Their argument was lost in a high-pitched sound. A glint flashed across the rearview mirror. It happened again. The noise and flashes increased, as if gaining on them. The unassuming SUV had donned lights and sirens. The flashing red lights from inside the cab looked angry, and the flashing headlights played a game of gotcha. Jerry cursed and slowly pulled over. The window slid into the door, and Jerry glanced back at the highway patrolman. "License and registration, please." He handed both to the patrolman. "You don't have anything better to do?" The patrolman's head snapped up from examining the documents. "Sir, wait here while I check on something." He rolled the window up to guard from the Texas heat. "I can't believe this guy." "I can't believe you," mumbled David. Both sat quiet, letting the air conditioning keep them cool. Eventually, the patrolman returned. "Sir, you've had 2 moving violations in the last 18 months. I'm citing you for reckless driving and improper lane change." "What?" Jerry exclaimed. "I can't believe this crap." "Sir, according to my radar, you were doing more than 20 over the limit. You made a lane change with a solid yellow line and within a 1/4 mile of a hill. You endangered my life and the life of that trucker." "I oughta throw this ticket away," Jerry said, while shaking it in the patrolman's face. "I'd then have to cite you for littering. Drive safely, sir." Jerry rolled the window back up while putting the ticket in his visor pocket. With the window cracked, he had to get in the last word. "Asshole." He stewed at the patrolman while driving away. As the sun set behind him, it seemed to cool his temper. Until they reached Fort Worth. Jerry stayed in the passing lane, honking at anyone traveling too slow and making abrupt lane changes. Almost to the office, he sailed through 2 red lights. He stopped when a car in front of him stopped for the traffic signal. As soon as the light turned green, Jerry honked. "Move it, dipshit. It's green." Reaching the office, he took the documents inside and turned them into his boss. He showed David the proper techniques for checking the documents in and checking out for the day. "So that's the life of a courier. What do you think?" David stepped close and stared at Jerry angrily. "I may be new here, but you were downright reckless and unprofessional today. I'm willing to keep this between you and me today. But if I ever hear of you acting like this again or see it, I'll go straight to the offices about it." Jerry laughed when David turned and walked away. What does he know? I'm a good driver. I'm a professional. It was their fault. Pushing the accelerator hard, Jerry passed the slow driver. "Jerk," he said while honking. Still angry about David's tirade from yesterday, Jerry tried to imagine how he could have handled the situation better. "I should have told him I've been driving courier for 10 years, and he should keep his mouth shut, or I'll shut it for him. Or I could have told him to go to hell. Maybe I should have." His mind snapped to attention when seeing another slow-moving driver. Glancing at his speedometer, Jerry noticed he traveled nearly 90. What is today? Everyone drives slow today? "Asshole," he yelled while passing the car. Hearing a horn, he saw the car in the oncoming lane. Accelerating, he zipped back into his lane with a few seconds to spare. A yawn deflated Jerry's ire. The sun started to drop in the western sky, taking away the gale force winds. For a split second, the beautiful orange glare took away his temper. The highway seemed lonelier today. He actually missed David in the car. Occasionally, he did train a new driver, which was something he enjoyed. His stomach moaned. Jerry sped faster, wanting to get to a restaurant in the next town, then drop off the last bit of pharmaceuticals, then head home. The car seemed relieved as well when the engine stopped. Stretching his back and arms, Jerry tried to awaken his stiff, atrophied muscles. Popping his joints, he looked forward to a nice meal. Sitting at his toilet booth, he did not even glance at the menu. The familiar waitress appeared. Somewhere between fit and heavy, she had aged gray eyes that had plenty of wisdom, but mostly from hearing stories. Her wrinkles disappeared in a smile, giving off a pleasant light. It was the typical small-town cafe waitress who had the friendly ear and subtle wisdom. "Hi, Jerry." "The usual?" "Hey, Diane." "Yeah, the usual." "How's the job?" "Boring as ever. Picking up piss, drugs, and lab tests. At least all the idiot drivers make it interesting." She smiled while filling out the ticket. "It'll be out soon, hun." Jerry sighed, dreading the 2-hour drive back to Fort Worth. Damn dipshit drivers. Not all idiots. Jerry looked at the old man who sat in the booth next to him. Was he there before? They all can't be idiots. Grandpa said, if you meet one idiot a day, you met an idiot. If everyone you meet is an idiot, you may be the idiot. He was right, you know. Anger's no good. It leads to prisons and a terrible lot in life. The darkness almost hid the distinguished wrinkles and tired eyes. A red, faded ball cap had Stan's trucking stenciled on it. I used to be on the giving end of anger. Now I receive it. Constantly. Perplexed, Jerry wondered why a man whose voice had so much wisdom also dripped with sadness. "It's a lonely life," the man said, "but it's my lot. I'll take it, though I hate it." Jerry hunched his shoulders. "Hate what?" "Ever since..." The man shook his head, unable to finish his sentence. Jerry stood and glanced outside, noticing the large, black truck. "That yours?" asked Jerry. The old man nodded lightly. "Yep, been driving it for years. I hope someday someone can take my place." Jerry stood, wanting to get away from the bizarre old man. He rushed to the bathroom, washed his hands, then returned for dinner. "Good," Jerry mumbled, glad the old man had left. Glancing out the window, the truck was also gone. The waitress finally returned with dinner. "So, Diane, what's with the old coot who was in that booth?" Debbie narrowed her eyelids. "Old man? The one in that booth there," Jerry said, pointing at it. Debbie put her hands on her hips. "I haven't sat anyone in that booth tonight." Jerry looked towards the other booth, wondering if he perceived the sitting arrangement correctly. No. A woman and her child sat there, and he remembered them. He pointed outside. Remember, his cap said, "Stan's Trucking." "Wait a minute," she said disdainfully. "The old man with the Stan's Trucking ball cap?" Jerry nodded, finally taking a bite of his steak. Her voice changed, with a mixture of eeriness and joviality. "Ooh, honey, you've seen a ghost." "I don't believe in ghosts. Legend has it, a guy named Stan disappeared on this highway about 20 years ago. His truck had this route to Abilene, but truck and driver disappeared. No one ever found him or his truck." Jerry shook his head. "No way. The guy was here. Probably a new guy for Stan's Trucking." "Well, if he was here," said Debbie, "he stiffed a check and my tip. And I didn't have to bus the table." Jerry shook his head while finishing his meal. A large semi sped by, spreading the dry Texas dirt behind it, along with the carbon monoxide. Jerry coughed. Wiggling his keys, Jerry unlocked his small pickup and got in. The last delivery. Finally, he could go home. 2 more hours, then a weekend of rest and recreation awaited him. His wheels launched him onto the lonely, dark highway. Darkness spread in front of him, while the sun's light faded behind him. Jerry's eyelids felt heavy. Too much to eat, he thought. He slapped himself and turned on the radio, trying to wake himself. After singing a few bars, he yawned, preventing any distinguishable lyrics. Quickly, he switched it over to a talk radio station, hoping the host might stir some thought to stay awake. No. The eyelids tried to shut. He jerked his head up and opened his eyes wide. As soon as he finished, they tried to shut again. He snapped his head to attention, hoping to stave off sleep. The right side of his truck vibrated heavily, jarring him awake. Quickly, he pulled off the rumble strip and back into the lane. Shaking his head, he remembered a rest stop about 40 miles down the highway. He hoped to make it. His head dropped again. Jerry's eyes blurred. As his vision narrowed, his mind relaxed, anticipating blissful sleep. Almost there, unable to fight it, his eyes closed. A loud honking noise jolted Jerry awake. Cursing, he pulled his head up and cursed loudly. What the? Headlights closed in. Too bright and too close, they almost blinded him. Back off, jerk. Fully awake now, Jerry saw his speed near 85. The vehicle behind him closed the gap. Able to flip the rearview mirror, he sped up, trying to gain some distance. The truck continued to remain close, as if taunting him. I said, Jerry said, while tapping the brakes. Back off. The loud horn almost hurt his ears. It sounded 3 or 4 times. The truck closed the gap again. What the? Jerry said, while flipping off the driver. He hoped the driver of the vehicle could see him. The loud honking started again, jarring Jerry's eardrums. He wanted to cover his ears, but he feared taking both hands off the steering wheel with this maniac behind him. Seeing the small shoulder, Jerry pulled to the right. He ignored the annoying vibrations from the shoulder grooves. Okay, he said, while slowing down. Go ahead and get around me. The vehicle also pulled over, maintaining a close distance to Jerry's bumper. What the? He glanced ahead, seeing nothing in the oncoming lane. It's clear, you idiot. Get around me. The horn resounded again, bellowing louder, as if releasing anger or sheer malevolence. Suddenly, an empty feeling tried to drag his chest down. Sensing harm as the driver's intent scared him. An ominous dread filled his chest. Jerry moved to the empty oncoming lane, hoping the driver would pass him. The truck followed every move. In fact, now it seemed as if the vehicle moved to make sure and get its bright lights into the side rear-view mirrors. "Damn it," Jerry yelled. "What the hell is your problem?" He moved back to the correct lane, only to be followed again. Defenseless, Jerry felt nervous and outmatched. Whatever vehicle stalked him, he could tell it was at least 2 or 3 feet higher, like an SUV or oversized pickup. The driver pulled alongside Jerry and flashed its lights at him. It honked again, startling him. "You goddamned idiot," he yelled while rolling down his window. "You're gonna kill—" His voice trailed. The dread froze his mind as he recognized the large black truck from the diner. He barely caught the license plate. EVL 666. Jerry might laugh, but he panicked and hit his brakes hard as the truck swerved in front of him, flashed its brake lights for a second, then sped up. The black truck blended with the night. Brake lights revealed its presence again. Jerry veered to the right while hitting his brakes. This time, all tires left the pavement, and his small truck rolled across the plains. Tumbleweeds and tall grass slammed into his grill and thumped the hood. He crashed through a small wooden fence. Scared, he slowed more. A cow appeared in his lights. Veering hard to the right, Jerry barely missed it. Some trees appeared. Panicked, Jerry pushed the brake all the way to the floor. His truck jolted to a stop. Jerry's chest slapped the steering wheel, while papers, pens, and trash all snapped forward. Dust rolled into his cab, trying to choke his throat and invade his eyes. Even though the air conditioner poured cold air on his face, sweat beaded down his forehead and made his palms slick. He quivered, actually fearing for his life. Nearly 200 yards away, the black truck waited on the shoulder. Dust outlined its bright headlights. Jerry stared at the monster, forgetting his fear and forging hatred. Furious, he grabbed his steel flashlight. Clutching it tightly, he imagined pounding the driver's head until it turned into a bloody pulp. "You goddamn jerk," he said, while gaining anger with every step. "Get out of the truck!" The horn sounded, slightly startling him. "I said, get out of the truck," he said, while hitting the hood with his flashlight. The horn wailed again. "I said," Jerry said, reaching for the door. "Get out of—" The door opened. Fiery eyes leapt at Jerry. The mouth, lined with disfigured, randomly sharpened teeth, howled loudly. Cold, shadowy arms extended and tried to grab him. Jerry slammed the door and fell backwards. Panicked, He jumped up and rushed back to his truck. The shrill horn sounded again, leaving behind a cold, dreaded fright. In a full run, he got back to his car, slammed the door shut, and rolled up the window. You can't get away from him. Jerry shined the light at the old man. What the? Who are you? What's going on? The old man looked as if he was about to cry. I'm sorry, but he's letting me go, and he needs a new driver. Get the hell out! Jerry screamed, while trying to push the old man out of the truck. More confused than scared, Jerry stopped trying to extract the man. What are you talking about? I thought you were... An invisible vice clamped on Jerry's neck. Feeling like cold steel, the touch robbed the warmth in his body. In his rear-view mirror, he saw it. The monster's disfigured face looked as if it had been burned. Its eyes alternated between a hollow, black color and a fiery red anger. Its large mouth stretched wide, emanating a deadly hiss. So long, young fellow, you'll learn, just as I did. Jerry tried to reach for the old man's help. Ignored, he struggled against the powerful, cold grip. It clamped tighter. Soon, everything blurred, then went dark. David stared at the long, forgotten highway while yawning. The road stretched endlessly, fading into a blur in the far distance. Soon, the sun started to recede behind him, trying to blind him in the mirrors. The empty miles obstructed his journey back to Fort Worth. David wondered what happened to Jerry. He was last seen at a cafe several miles back. Then he disappeared. The highway patrol could not find him, nor his truck. David snapped awake as he approached a black pickup truck. It traveled too slow. Needing to get around it, David moved to the left. Unable to see very well, David lightly tapped his horn. The truck moved to the right, then he zipped around it. Move it, dummy! Jerry stared into the distance as the small pickup got around him. Tired, he wanted to sleep. Depressed, he wanted to cry. Hungry, he longed for food. His passenger, though, enjoyed making him listen to everyone who passed him. Jerk! Idiot! You damn fool! Get the hell out of the way! Every insult echoed perfectly in Jerry's ears. Rambling rose. I'm late! Life always passes over me. I'm late is just another phrase for situation normal. Absolutely fluffed up. Did you put in your application, Rosie? An unnecessary question, probably motivated by a sense of duty. I give my usual frown and grimace, a sigh, an I don't care, but will try to appear concerned look. The office crew is sniffing each other out. They're silently musing on the expected unfairness, their anticipated realization of failure, judging nepotism or brown-nosing from each participant. Jones, from Service and Repair, has been studying his policies. Gretel has finished her Certificate 4 in admin. Will is confident and also disgruntled because he has been at the WAM desk for 3 years and feels he deserves the promotion. Georgia has made coffee for the PA to the director every day for the last 2 months, and today has homemade chocolate brownies. The bright young things wander confidently, secretive, holding clipboards, adjusting their ties and hair clips. It's a yearly raise of $20K, and not to be ignored. But I most studiously ignored it. The primitive yearning for some freedom has snared its unrealistic teeth right into my IT life. Hell, I don't even know what the word means. I haven't read Jack Kerouac, but sense that this might be one of life's moments when Kerouac isn't just a writer. Kerouac is where I want to be. Pens, wads of reports, tea bags, coffee bags, a banana already populated with several tiny Drosophilas, laptop charger, some screwed up piece of something, possibly a chocolate wrapper. Everything into the locker. Close the door tightly before anything falls out. There may be war once the position is filled. It's a late winter, but June in the Highlands is starkly beautiful, misty, haunting even. The trains have all left, and I park my red Subaru into a free parking lot. The sky is an empty gray slate, and the new moon barely lights the smooth concrete platform. I walk carefully to the graveled exit, look into the darkness, and start walking beside Highway number 1. Nobody would know if I am man or woman, as my hair is tucked into a black beanie. Nobody will try to stop for me, and I swagger, trying to look dangerous and unwelcome. My wind jacket is old and barely covers my hips. My tracky Dax gray, also old. Just another vagabond itinerant wandering the roads. I step purposefully, too quickly, and slow myself. The journey, not the destination, I say. The crunch of the gravel beneath my rubber-soled gym shoes is satisfying. Each step releases its perfume of rain, oil, and petrol. I breathe its nourishment like a 4-year-old who has escaped from the front yard onto the street for the first time. A dog howls and then barks, and the cars gradually dissipate. At some point, I realize I am alone, even from any flow of traffic. It is 11 p.m. I have been walking for 3 hours. I breathe even more deeply. The air has chilled. A faint silhouette of bushland lines the horizon, and a small window twinkles somewhere on a hillside. As I walk, this small, friendly light disappears behind a ridge. A kookaburra announces something. It's time we all just went to sleep now. I will keep walking. I will keep walking until I want to stop. More hours pass by as I contemplate the stiffness in my calves, the ache in my arches, and the spots where my jacket does not cover my legs properly. The sky has started to reveal stars, hundreds of different-sized lights, satellites drifting through them. Betelgeuse and Sirius, Pleiades, Orion's belt, familiar sky landmarks that are warm to the touch. Homey reminders that I am not completely out of my mind. Excitement suddenly makes me look up and revel in the starry expanse. Some loose barbed wire behind a ditch at the side of the road looks promising, and I duck through it. I am starting to feel tired. An irrigation ditch with straight sides has been carved into the bare landscape, its straight sides starkly incongruent with the rocky outcrops and overgrazed land. A breeze has started up, and snow must have fallen in the mountains as the wind is cold. I lie carefully in the ditch, careful not to wet my shoes, marveling at the convenience of a raised bed, however hard. Staring into the skies, I think, this is where I should have an epiphany. But what will it be? I am a traveler, a nomad, a gypsy on the road. This is where enlightenment and realization comes from. The cold is biting deep, and I cover spots alternatively when the pain gets too much. First my knees, then my torso, but never everything all at once. Looking imploringly into the stars, I let all sense of self leave me, my mind floating into that vast canopy. The cold makes me feel a bit sorry for myself, and I feel not just alone, but lonely. I think I slept, my icy dreams interspersed with awkward rearranging of the useless wind jacket. The romance of my zero-gravity bed, just a cold, hard slant with pointy pebbles pressing into my back and hips, a crackle of nearby dried grass, the swoosh of saltbush being brushed past, a movement so close that I lose my breath in terror. I jolted awake. Was this near where those hitchhikers had disappeared? What if there was a man with a hatchet studying me, waiting for me, a gun, an intent to harm me? My heart was in my ears, and I breathed noiselessly, trying to stop breathing so fast. I sink into the hard clay. Just another boulder. Nobody here. After a half hour of immobile silence, it seemed that the killer would have moved by now. But I slowly lifted my chin to survey what was behind me, above the ditch, expecting any moment my life could be taken from me. A snort in my ear, and a scuffle from all around where my head lay. A dozen sheep were startled from where they had been staring at me. They stood back, gazing at the intruder, and slowly backed off. I was safe. The sheep were my friends, my protectors. They trotted away quickly now that it was obvious what this warm, soft-bodied thing was. I stayed the next 2 days in a rented room, happily proud of the adventure. I even called Jones and congratulated him on his new interest in company policy. Surely this point will be noted by management as a sign he is a contender in the offing. We agreed that it was a done deal. Georgia's coffee-making was obsequiously good, and she was probably sleeping with the director anyway. I comforted Gretel and said she was far prettier than Georgia and had ethics, which Georgia patently did not. I put my hand on Will's shoulder and smiled. He'd get there soon, and was deserving. I might even explain my journey to Jones one day, but thought the better of it. I don't think he would understand. I barely could make sense of it myself. Wing woman. God, I hate flying. I look out the window of the 747, so foolishly boarded in my rush to get cross-country as quickly as possible. We are flying through some dark clouds, so there is little to see. The old, familiar fear rises in the pit of my stomach as I try to push it back. I have to maintain myself. Don't start to panic. Nothing's going to happen. I try to flood myself with calm, even as I'm white-knuckling the armrest. The 4 Jack Daniels I had before the flight aren't working. The plane is shaking a little bit. I get it. I am a nervous flyer myself. The stranger next to me smiles reassuringly, but her voice doesn't sound nervous at all. I never liked it and avoid it whenever I can. Cars or buses are safer. She chuckles. You do know that's not what they say. Who says? The experts, of course. You can't trust them. What makes them experts anyway? My face feels and flushed. Am I turning red? Well, they say flying is much safer than driving. Thousands dead every year from cars, but no fatal plane crashes in the United States for several years now. She's trying to calm me, but I've heard it all before. Don't believe a word. I know. I've heard all of that. But it just takes one plane to crash, and over 100 dead, just like that. What if it's this plane? I can feel it shaking. Is my voice trembling? I don't want her to notice and think I'm a coward. Hell, I am afraid. It's embarrassing for her to see it. Her face shows concern. Or is it contempt? I'm not sure. She's middle-aged, but still in good shape. And pretty. It's all right. Don't worry. Planes do all kinds of different things in flight. A little shaking is perfectly normal. I fly quite a bit, and know. You must think me a real loser for being so frightened, and you're so calm. Oh, I'm not calm, just a good actress. She teases. What's your name? Charles? But my friends call me Charlie. Well, Charlie, I'm Rachel. But my friends call me Rachel. She smiles and extends a slender hand. Because my hand is sweaty and a little shaky, I hesitate momentarily to return her handshake, but overcome my reluctance. She doesn't seem to notice or care about the condition of my hand. Where are you headed? I ask. To Dallas. I have a job in marketing, so I do a fair amount of traveling. But I still understand the nervousness. Never feel quite calm till the plane touches down and stops moving. I can't tell you are nervous at all. Like I said, Charlie, I'm good at acting the part of a calm, cool, and in-control flyer. Perfected the part, you might say. How about you? Where you headed? Family crisis. My mom is in bad shape, and I have to head to a small town about 100 miles outside of Dallas and get there quickly. Otherwise, I'd never be on this death trap. I smile, trying to make a little joke of my fear. Sorry to hear that, Charlie. I hope she gets well soon. So do I. But the doctors say the odds are against her. So this might be my last visit. I have to tell myself that as long as there is life, there's hope. God, I'm sorry. I lost my father about a year ago. It's horrible to go through. Our conversation is interrupted by a few particularly bigger bumps than the previous ones. After the shaking stops, her demeanor seems to change, and she sounds a little different when she resumes talking. Charlie, I feel bad for you. Not only are you having to deal with your mom's illness, but then you have to brave this shaky flight. I thought you said a little shaking was normal. Well, a little shaking at times is normal. She gets a little closer to me and lowers her voice a bit. However, to be truthful, this flight is a little more bouncy than usual, but I'm still not that concerned yet. What happened to projecting the fearless businesswoman? My fear level is rising again. Sorry. I guess I just feel more comfortable with you. I usually sit next to people who are totally fearless. They will hide stoically through the bumpiest of flights, showing no emotion, while I am churning inside, but still projecting my calm exterior. But with you, I can be real. It's liberating. Her slightly moist hand finds mine and squeezes it slightly. It's comforting to have a fellow passenger reveal her inner anxiety to me. We are companions in fear, friends of anxiety. Don't worry. It's nice to know I'm not the only one. Sometimes I feel that I can't even talk about it without people giving me all the statistics about how safe flying is and how foolish my concerns. I smile at her. Our inside joke. She softly laughs. You got me, Charlie. I was overcompensating, I guess. What can I say? Hope you don't think I am a pure hypocrite. Hypocrite? Heaven forbid. Just a good actress. Oh my, Charlie. Flattery will get you everywhere. She bravely says, but her hand pressure gives her away. More ups and downs, and more bumping now. Worse than anything before it. Quickly, the fasten seat belts lamp comes on, and the captain's voice comes over the loudspeaker, telling us we are experiencing a little unexpected turbulence, but there is nothing to worry about. Talk about acting. Do these guys train in how to project a confident and reassuring voice? Or what? I'm not believing him at all. There's got to be something wrong. Otherwise, why the seatbelt light and message from the captain? Why the ever-increasing bumping? The engines don't sound right at all. This isn't how engines should sound. Are they cutting out? Losing power? Are we losing altitude? I look over at Rachel. There is fear in her face now. Our sweaty hands are in a death grip. I'm so glad she's here with me. It's only the beginning of trouble. As I sit on the uncomfortable train seat, blankly staring out of the window, I feel the heat wash over me in an instant. Breath 1, breath 2, breath 3. It's okay. I can do this. Trying to stay calm and relaxed, I look away from the window, starting to feel dizzy from the speed we pass the trees with. You've done this before, I say to myself as a pep talk. Just because it's different setting doesn't mean you can't do it. There is only one problem. If it goes south, I won't be able to escape for another 3 hours of that train ride. I have to execute the plan perfectly to the last step to make sure I will get away with it. In moments like this, I swear at myself for choosing to do that specific line of work. I'm still a beginner. I am still nervous and anxious about the jobs, even though my mentor tries to convince me it will get easier and more natural. I let out a huff and smile at that thought. What a messed up world it is to get used to doing something so awful. I personally don't have a choice. I need to do this and clear the society from disgusting and horrible people. My eyes travel down to my backpack, trembling slightly from the train movements, filled with the tools I will need for this specific job. The top zip is open, and the sun faintly glints in body of the syringe I brought, the tool for Plan A. If all goes well, I won't have to travel too far down the alphabet to finish the job. But I prepared myself for many possibilities and outcomes. I push my head back onto the headrest and close my eyes, breathing in the dusty smell of the carriage. A quiet conversation of the couple 2 rows ahead of me reaches my ears, and I focus on their words to calm my nerves. It's hard to tell what the topic of their exchange is. All I can make out from it are words like secret, promise, disaster, and truth. The nosy part of me wants to move closer and listen in, but the rational part of me rejects the idea, bringing my focus back to my assignment. I should not distract myself with anything until the job is done and I can get off the train. My phone buzzes in my pocket, and I take it out to see my mentor's name on the screen. Yes, I answer quietly, looking around for any other passengers that could be in the earshot. What's the update? His low and raspy voice sounds in my ear, and a shiver travels down my spine. I will approach the target in 8 minutes, I reply, and saying it out loud must activate some more anxiety in me, because my leg starts bouncing and fingers start fidgeting with the seam of my jeans. Keep me in the loop, he says, and hangs up. I take one last deep breath and stand up, grabbing my backpack and closing the zip. Here we go. Slowly, I make my way towards the front carriage. The first-class one I don't have a ticket for. You have to be confident when walking past, but not too confident. It brings attention. Easy. I enter the carriage and quickly scan the faces I can see for my target. I notice him at the table the furthest away from me, so deeply interested in whatever he is typing on the laptop that I can sense it will be easy to execute my plan A. He has got gray hair with some black streaks still running through. The suit he is wearing looks expensive, perfectly tailored to his broad shoulders, but slim figure. He has got a clean shave, but the eyebrows he is furrowing are thick and badly unshaped. Luckily, he looks exactly like the picture I was given. The fact that he has a laptop on the table and a drink next to it is a slight inconvenience. I wouldn't want to damage his laptop in the first part of the process, as he may not be as forgiving for me to move to the second stage of the plan. My movements have to be even more careful now. I cannot afford to make a mistake here. I shuffle my backpack and tilt it to the right side, which is where the tables are. As I slowly make my way towards the end of the carriage, I intensely calculate the angle I have to use to not cause too much trouble. My target's laptop is by the window side of the table, as is he, still furiously typing on the keyboard. His wine glass is placed to his right, almost at the edge of the table, which means my best move is to knock it away from him and his laptop. I swallow hard, take another deep breath, and head to the door that lead to the next carriage. As I am about to open it, I turn to my right and push his glass off the table. Oh my goodness, I am so incredibly sorry, sir, I say nervously, trying to keep my voice slightly higher pitched than my natural one, and I take some tissues out of the side pocket of my backpack. He swears and closes his laptop. How the hell can you be so clumsy? He's angry. I can hear it in his voice. It must have been a nice glass of wine. But then he looks at me, the low cleavage of my blouse, the long and wavy brown hair barely covering anything, and he smiles. The frustration from his face is gone. Sir, please, I will buy you a new drink, I promise. I mumble, still pretending to be stressed over this situation. Ah, darling, please don't worry. It's just a liquid. When I'm done wiping off the seat opposite him, I throw the tissues in the bin and head for the bar, leaving my backpack innocently on the seat by the window. As I walk away, I make sure to swing my hips with the movement to attract more of his attention. With the wine replacement in my hand, I walk back to the table and smile innocently at my target. He smiles back at me, probably thinking he got lucky I came across him. I know what he does when no one is looking, to what atrocities He lowers himself when he is not pretending to be a highly respected businessman. And I also know that my silly outfit and clumsiness made him incredibly happy. Wipe this smile off your face, you monster. You have no idea what's coming. I sit on the bench I just wiped off and push my backpack under the table, right by my legs. My name is Cassie, I say, and gently bat my eyelashes at him. I hope I didn't spill any wine on your gorgeous suit or very expensive-looking laptop. I chuckle nervously, waiting for his reaction. Well, Cassie, I think you just got lucky. Nothing seems to be damaged. I look at the table behind the laptop. Actually, there may be a little left here. Please, let me... I lean to my backpack under the pretense to get the tissues, and with them, I take out the syringe and place it on my lap. After wiping the invisible stain off the table, I smile at my target again. Thank you for being so understanding. Of course. Before he says anything else, I stab his thigh with my unassuming weapon, and his eyes open wide. What did you just do? Shh, I say in my normal voice, and watch him slowly drift away. Have a nap, sir. The seeds of dominion. 1. I always knew the world was constructed on lies. Not minor falsehoods or innocent misunderstandings, but carefully cultivated fabrications designed to shape reality. From my earliest memories, even before my parents disappeared, I sensed that truth was not something freely given. It was deliberately hidden, erased, and rewritten. My parents were among the first to resist. They stood against the dominion when resistance still felt possible, believing knowledge was a right worth risking everything to protect. They vanished when I was 6, quietly removed by the regime, their identities reduced to whispers and fading memories. Ronan and Elise Marek, old friends of my parents and former resistance fighters themselves, took me in. They taught me how to navigate the unseen currents beneath the surface, how to decode the hidden language of control the dominion embedded in every broadcast and headline. They showed me the creeping corporate feudalism that had slowly replaced democracy as powerful corporations silently took ownership of entire districts, deciding who prospered and who disappeared. By 16, I was adept at uncovering secrets. I immersed myself in encrypted data streams and forgotten archives. Ronan and Elise warned me. Knowing too much was dangerous, but ignorance was deadly. The Dominion thrived because people feared the truth. They accepted convenience over freedom. My decision to become a journalist was calculated. It allowed me to move unnoticed, to gather information without drawing suspicion. Yet deep down, I knew this was more than a career. It was a weapon against tyranny. Truth was powerful, but proof was lethal. 2. You ever feel like you're chasing ghosts, Joran? I glanced up from my tablet. where Dominion data feeds ran endlessly, searching for cracks in their carefully constructed narratives. Devin Rains, my closest friend since our academy days, watched me from across the cafe table, worry shadowing his face. We chase ghosts because they're the only thing the Dominion fears, I replied evenly. Devin's discomfort was palpable, a subtle anxiety coloring every gesture. Recently, he'd changed. He'd grown cautious, hesitant. The war's been over for years, Devin said softly. Maybe they won because no one noticed until it was too late. Now, all we're doing is marking ourselves as targets. His words unsettled me, not for their truth, but because they were spoken from fear. Devin's courage had once matched mine, his idealism unwavering. Something had shifted. What's changed, Devin? I leaned forward, lowering my voice instinctively. Surveillance was everywhere, hidden in plain sight. He hesitated, eyes flicking nervously to the security camera mounted near the ceiling. There's a new list, he whispered. It's not for criminals or dissidents. It's for people who question too much. It's called the Inquiry List. I understood immediately. A blacklist was straightforward, immediate punishment or exile. The Inquiry List was something darker, insidious. It marked you for isolation, slow erosion, and eventual disappearance. You're on it, I stated flatly, watching him closely. He nodded slowly. We both are. A silent understanding passed between us. Devin was frightened, and fear made people dangerous. Still, I wasn't about to stop. Not now, when the stakes had finally become clear. 3. Devin disappeared within days. His presence simply ceased. No messages, no records, no traces. Just silence. I pursued answers with relentless determination, hacking into secured archives, whispering in underground circles, piecing together fragments of his fate. Each revelation deepened my dread. The Dominion Protocol wasn't coming. It had arrived. Our world was now governed by rigid conformity, loyalty measured in unquestioning obedience. Citizens weren't people. They were assets, evaluated for their utility, discarded when inconvenient. I stared numbly at the evidence on my tablet. Democracy hadn't merely been undermined, it had been methodically dismantled. Devin wasn't dead, not physically. He had been absorbed, transformed into something compliant and controlled. 4. I knew when they would come. Patterns were easy to spot if you paid attention. Increased drone patrols, subtle shifts in daily broadcasts, neighbors becoming suddenly distant. It was all carefully staged. When the knock finally came, I was already on the move. Out through the fire escape, down silent alleyways, navigating shadows with practiced ease. My heart pounded, but my breathing remained steady. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. The train station loomed ahead, my gateway to the industrial underground. Passengers waited silently, their faces blank, eyes fixed firmly forward. I slipped onto the platform just as Dominion enforcers emerged, their armored presence imposing and inevitable. Joran Vale, the voice sent a chill down my spine. Not the enforcer's voice, but Devon's. I turned slowly, dread twisting inside me. Devon stood among them, dressed in Dominion black, his eyes hollow and distant. I recognized the vacancy instantly. The Dominion had taken not only his freedom, but his spirit. "Come quietly," he intoned, emotionless. "You gave in," I accused bitterly. "They made you afraid, and you surrendered." "I adapted," he replied mechanically. "No," I said sharply. "Adaptation isn't compliance." His gaze faltered. Something brief and vulnerable flickering behind those empty eyes. Devon reached toward me, an automated reflex of the Dominion's control. The train doors hissed open beside me, a brief window of opportunity. Devon lunged, grabbing my shoulder. Instinct took over. I drove my elbow hard into his ribs, feeling him recoil sharply, gasping for breath. His grip loosened, and I wrenched free, leaping onto the train just as the doors snapped shut behind me. Through the window, Devon stared helplessly, now a shadow fading into the distance. Regret etched his features briefly before the darkness reclaimed him. The train surged forward, carrying me into uncertainty, but also toward freedom. 5. As the city lights blurred into a mosaic of neon and shadow, I steadied my breathing. The train hummed rhythmically beneath my feet, a steady reassurance that, for now, I was still free. Passengers around me stared blankly ahead, eyes purposely unfocused, trained to remain ignorant of anything that might threaten their carefully curated peace. But I was awake. The Dominion thrived on the apathy of the masses, believing control was absolute because compliance was easy. Yet beneath that facade lay a deep-seated fear of truth, a fragile illusion ready to shatter. I had lost Devon, just as I'd lost my parents. Each loss carved itself into my being. Painful reminders that truth always came at a cost. But their sacrifices were not in vain. They'd ignited a flame in me, nurtured by Ronan and Elise, a flame of resistance, a commitment to remember, to speak, and to expose the lies. The Dominion underestimated the strength of those who remembered, those who chose truth over comfort. They believed themselves untouchable, their rule eternal. But power built upon lies was fundamentally unstable, vulnerable to those willing to risk everything for the truth. As the train raced deeper into the industrial outskirts, darkness settled around me, punctuated only by flickering lights and distant shadows. I pressed my forehead gently against the cold window, eyes scanning the landscape rushing past. Factories loomed on the horizon, silent giants standing guard over secrets yet undiscovered. My heart steadied, determination hardening like tempered steel. They might hunt me, silence me, or erase my name from history, but they couldn't erase the truth. Not while people like me still breathed. The Dominion hadn't won, not yet, on a parallel track, unnoticed. Another train moved quietly through the shadows. Inside, illuminated by the pale glow of a screen, a figure stared intently at my image, captured by surveillance cameras. Eyes narrowed thoughtfully, studying every detail of my escape, every gesture, every defiance. From the tinted window of his train car, Devon watched the darkness unfold, shadows reflecting in his eyes no longer hollow, but haunted by the flicker of something forgotten. He whispered softly to himself, a truth long buried, but impossible to erase. The truth is not a ghost. It is a weapon, and outside, the city faded slowly into darkness.